Hello everyone, so today we're going to continue talking gear. We're going to go over my CR Speed holster setup for competition in a bit more detail. I've got my Glock 35 with me, nothing in the mag well. I have an empty chamber and I've got my CR Speed rig with me. The CR Speed holster that I'm running is the WSM2 model, which is their World Shoot Model 2 holster. And I've got the Seatbacks hanger on it, which is great because I can secure the hanger directly to the belt through these two holes over here. And I've got a gap over here in the hanger that exposes some of the Velcro on the belt, which gives me better adhesion between the inner and the outer belts. The Seatbacks is ideal because then I have a holster that's in the same place every time. I don't have any wiggling. I don't have a holster that can move along the belt line, etc. When we get into the holster now, we know that the holster bodies from CR Speed come out with a fairly long body, and that's just to accommodate a huge variety of different guns. And most of us like to cut that excess material off, myself included. I must caution you that when you cut this off, you obviously want to take all the burrs and sharp edges off. You don't want a holster that can cut you. It must still be comfortable. And if you're running smaller guns like maybe a CZ P07, certain SIGs, like Glock 19 length slides, don't cut too much of the holster body away because you end up with a stubby subcompact holster, which is actually less than ideal. You have reference points of where your hand's going to be before the start signal of the stage, and you want to keep those references. You want to know where your hand's going to be every time, and obviously you want to know where the gun's going to be every time. If you've got a stubby holster, this becomes incredibly difficult while still being comfortable, and more often than not actually adhering to the rules of your sport. So be aware of that, be cautious of it, and be mindful. Once you cut it, you can't put it back. When we go further into the holster, your holster will be supplied with a series of wedges and spacers for in between the holster body and the hanger itself. You're going to have to fiddle with that because it's going to depend on your body type, maybe the sport or even the division that you compete in. Like for example in IPSC, just remember that we have that 50mm rule that we discussed in our previous video. Be mindful of what you're doing, make sure that you conform to the rules. Sometimes you can't change what you've set up when you're breaking the rules. Keep that in mind, be cautious of it. If we look at more specifics in the holster setup, you're going to have to adjust the muzzle platform on your gun to suit your gun, maybe during the setup, etc., depending on what you're shooting. So for me, I like to have a little bit of a gap between when the muzzle lifts or starts to lift off this platform and when it starts to engage this clip over here. So there's actually a little bit of movement on the gun before that clip starts to move, and that's just a little bit of extra security. If you're running the gun on the edge of the clip over here, you might have a secure holster, but you're running right on the edge of that sort of retention system. I like to have that little bit more security where the gun's got a little bit more free play before it engages that retention clip. And one of the things I see guys and girls could be doing better with their CR Speed setup is right over here where your trigger guard locates into the holster. So if I clip mine in quickly, my 35 in, you can see where the trigger guard sits in there. What often happens with people when they set it up is, okay, with your Glock holsters, this trigger guard section comes set up for the width of the trigger guard. Because it's slightly wider than most model guns, they had to manufacture a system that worked for the Glocks. If you're running a CZ, SIGs, Tanfolios, etc., etc., you're gonna 1911s, 2011s, you're gonna get a series of spacers that get screwed in on this side of the holster over here, which is going to adjust the width or the available width that you have in this region. What often happens is guys will either not use enough spacers, so you have like a rattle fit of the gun in the holster, which is not ideal because the gun can move around. Obviously it's not as secure as it should be, and that at some point could cause some sort of safety concern for you. The other thing that we see is people putting too many spacers in, and what happens to these arms over here is they sort of sprawl out. So instead of having them fairly parallel, they sprawl out like this. Now what that does is it reduces the amount of surface area or the mating surface areas between the trigger guard or the gun and the holster. And when you do that, it might feel like you have more resistance or more retention of the gun in the holster, but it's going to be much more instantaneous in how it lets go. Because you're doing that to the plastic, it's essentially trying to force the trigger guard out of there. So it might feel like there's more retention, but it's more instantaneous. When you fiddle with it, it's going to start releasing immediately, maybe even while you're walking. For me, the most ideal thing to do is to try and get these arms as parallel to one another as possible and as close to the fit of the trigger guard that the gun you're setting up is. Because you've got more surface area on there. This clip over here is doing its job properly. When you engage the lock on the holster, that's going to be doing its job properly. And having more contact between the trigger guard and the holster is going to give you more friction, which is going to increase the retention that you have on the gun, and it's going to be ideal. Now from my side, and this isn't endorsed by CR Speed or anybody, I will occasionally warm up this plastic region, these two arms, and I'll bend them inward slightly, and they'll spring in a little bit, which gives me even more retention. And I like to have more retention on my competition holsters because it's more forgiving in my draw. I can develop my grip while I'm drawing the gun. The gun's not going to just glide out of the holster without any control. And I like to have that feedback and feeling of where the gun is and when it's left the holster. So keep that in mind. But obviously, if you do heat up the plastic, if you heat it up too much, obviously plastic melts. And secondly, if you heat it up too much, you can change the structural integrity of the plastic, which means it could become brittle. It might lose its springiness, that sort of effect. Keep that in mind. It is a technique, it is something to learn, and that works the best for me. This is pretty much going to cover my thoughts on the holster. If you have any questions about it, please let me know. I'd be happy to answer any questions to the best of my abilities. Other than that, we'll be covering some more content soon. We hope you guys are enjoying the YouTube channel. If you are, please like the video, please subscribe and share wherever you can. We appreciate your support. Until then, be safe, and I'm sure we'll see you on the range soon. Thanks, everybody.